Record. Okay, I'm here with Alix Stayton from PWAG, and me and Alex met some time ago. I met her when she was a consultant. She was a very good consultant, emergency management consultant, but now she's an emergency manager for many water utilities. So I want to go ahead and introduce you, Alex, and tell us your story about how you got started.
Thanks. Well, I'm Alix Stayton. I'm the Emergency Management Coordinator for Public Water Agencies Group. I have been an emergency manager since Hurricane Katrina. I was working for a nonprofit that did financial literacy work, and they had a division helping people get financially prepared for a disaster. And they knew they wanted to have a cadre of volunteers to help people recover financially from a disaster. So I had never worked at a nonprofit. I kind of knew how to balance my checkbook, so that was my financial literacy.
Hmm.
I didn't know emergency management was a thing. And about 3 months into that, Hurricane Katrina hit. And so away we went. And I got deployed to Florida and then did a lot of work in Mississippi and Alabama. So that was a couple of things. That was when I figured out, like, oh, this might be the actual thing I want to be when I grow up. But it also really helped me understand how the disaster response and relief and recovery mechanisms work in the United States, and how, all the training that FEMA and the American Red Cross and everybody's always encouraging people to do. It helps us to align with the structures that are in place to help people. And so if you have that training ahead of time, then you have a better idea of kind of how to plug in and get information and get what you need, and or to help other people. It's a little bit harder to provide help than organizations think sometimes. So practicing that ahead of time and understanding how to fit in there is really helpful. So after I left that nonprofit, I ran the LA County VOAD for 5 years, and VOAD stands for Voluntary Organizations Active in Disasters. So that's all the nonprofits that do disaster preparedness, response, and relief stuff. And that was an amazing opportunity. I just met so many kinds of people all throughout LA County and really got familiar with boy, the all the little corners and crevices of LA County. I really went everywhere.
Mm.
And then I left that work to consult. And so I spent 8 or 9 years writing plans and doing training and exercises just for all kinds of organizations. I was a subcontractor for several really talented principal consultants, and we would write plans for big businesses and small businesses and government agencies and nonprofits and city departments and stuff like that. And it just really was a great opportunity to learn all the things. And maybe 6 or 7 years ago, I started working with a talented consultant who focuses on critical infrastructure. So that was when I started working particularly for utilities, and we did some work for SDG&E, but mainly a bunch of water districts. And they were in Orange County and LA County. And I spent a little bit of time as the safety specialist at Irvine Ranch Water District in Orange County. But the more I work in the water sector, the more I love it. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
And I'm a city person, right? Like, I grew up, you open the tap and the water comes out, and that's the end of the story. So for me, working in the water sector is really fascinating. And critical infrastructure, it's really satisfying because it's really, those are the things that people need the
Mhm.
most, but it's also the things that first responders need the most, right? They need power, they need natural gas, they need water, they need telecoms to do disaster response. So trying to help all of these water districts become more prepared and more ready to work together, it's a super satisfying thing. So
Yeah.
Public Water Agencies Group is a professional association of now 21 water agencies in LA County. And
Wow.
we have a bunch of different kinds. Yeah, there's a lot of them. They actually got
21.
together quite a ago, and they were just doing cost sharing and kind of trying to stay updated on legislative changes and compliance requirements and stuff like that. And um, about 5 or 6 years ago, they decided, oh, well, what we really need is an emergency preparedness program. So they had a person doing that, the emergency preparedness coordinator, and he was a retired water district general manager, and he really put together a great program. And they were just trying to be ready because, I mean, it's earthquake country, and now we have wildfires year round and all of that stuff. So they were really trying to focus on making sure that all the agencies knew how to get prepared, because we
Mhm.
have teeny tiny ones and we have big ones. LA County is big, and we have districts that are vulnerable to different things. Some of them are really different than others. And so just
I feel
helping
like,
them
yeah, you kind
individually
of,
figure out.
sorry to interrupt, but I feel like you have the whole gamut of emergency manager because you have so many
Yeah,
water utilities to deal with. Like most emergency managers you meet, they have like one or two things that they have to focus on for that particular water utility. But you have to do
right.
everything that touches the you said
All
21, right?
things.
21 water utilities.
21.
Wow.
19 of them are in my emergency response program. So yeah, and I mean, we have private water companies, we have mutuals, and Water Master is in that group, although I don't have to worry about them. They're already prepared. We have a wholesaler in the group. So, I have a district that has 7 employees.
Wow.
And yeah, they're teeny tiny, and I have a district, that has 230. So, they are very different in size. Some of them are much more vulnerable to wildfires. They're in the foothills, things like that.
Mhm.
They, have problems with mudslides. I have really urban water districts who are having a harder time with maybe physical security. Um, Boy, cybersecurity is really becoming a thing for water
Yeah.
in a big way. Something that, for the longest time as an emergency manager, I would always say, well, let's bring in a cybersecurity specialist and have them teach us, and let's follow the best practices. And I felt like I wasn't trying to get out of my lane. And it wasn't that I didn't want to learn about it. I just felt it was so important to always speak to experts about it, but I can't. It's just become so important, and it's really critical. So I'm learning a lot more about it. I think our districts are learning a lot more about it in a lot of different job functions than they used to. It used to be a thing, don't click on the attachment or whatever, but now people are starting to really have to learn a lot more about it. So yeah, the folks who created the emergency response group at PWAG were modeling that program after a longer, more established program in Orange County called We Rock. And that stands for Water Emergency Response Orange
Right.
County. And
Yeah, yeah.
they've been around a long time. So successful, so important as a precedent.
Hmm.
And so by the time I came on board almost 2 years ago now, they had really formed a great program here at PWAG, just trying to make sure that people had preparedness information for their agency, preparedness information for their families and, themselves at home. And they started working on programs to figure out, all right, let's do a project to help us make sure we've all got emergency power. Let's create a project so that we all have emergency communications, and they're trying to learn more about mutual aid and mutual assistance and how to help each other. So when that person retired, they were really looking for someone who was a career emergency manager and who could kind
Hmm.
of run the ball down the field. So what I'm doing is just building on that really good program. And I spent quite a bit of time when I was at Irvine Ranch Water District, learning about health and safety. Some of my duties there had more to do with OSHA and that health and safety program. And I really saw in that time how tied together the health and safety program is to the preparedness and response initiatives that a district might want to undertake. If your health and safety game is strong, it's going to make it so much easier to be prepared and understand how to respond and maybe be ready to help other agencies. So I kind of tie those programs together. I've got a great safety working group that's made up of some of the water district staff and me, and we kind of tie those topics together for the agencies. They really had a good situational awareness part of their program where their previous coordinator sent them a lot of information about what was going on all the time. And so I'm trying to really embed that in the districts now. And when I send them an alert, oh, maybe it's a red flag warning, for example, I'm sending them all of the links so that they can check whenever there's a red flag, so that they can look at the National Weather Service alerts page, so that they can figure out what the situational awareness is for themselves around them, and kind of move them forward in their maturity, so that rather than waiting for me to always send them things, and of course I send the urgent things, but encouraging them to kind of grow in that capacity themselves and be able to look and check and know what kind of planning they need to do. So everybody's so excited to do the work and figure out how can they tie it in and how can they get better at it. And I love working with the water districts because they always want to know more. They always want to attend another training, and they always want to figure out how can they help each other, which I think is really generous. And it's important because we have this gamut, to
Mhm.
run of the small, the large, and one of my biggest districts is sitting right on a piece of that San Andreas Fault. So sure, they're big and they can help a lot of people, but boy, if the earthquake comes, they're going to be in a world of hurt and they're going to need help. So,
Mhm.
um, you know, with the emergency radios, and we have 3 shared portable generators now. We're maybe talking about doing some shared fueling capacity. I'm just really proud of the work that the water districts do.
That's great. That's great. I mean, I think everybody who's in this business, you rarely see people that kind of exit this business. They either stay and they retire, or they're just not, they're not here at all. They once they're here, they're here for a long years of years and years. So I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
Like that when it's kind of addicting, this industry.
Yeah, yeah, water's great. It's nice because I think it's, the industry that I've worked with where you go and you do a training or an exercise and you go around the room and you say, tell me your name and your job title and how long you've been with the water district. And it's so common. I've been here 15 years. I've been here 21 years. I've been here 30
Hmm.
years.
Yeah.
Boy, they've got some real institutional memory to draw on.
Mhm.
And a lot of these districts, it's also a family, which is a really great place to go every day for work.
Yeah, I kind of get excited when I see a newbie, when I see like a young person in this business, and it's like, wow, you
Yeah.
really started. They're so rare,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's like,
so
congratulations, welcome to the
yeah,
family.
yeah, right, right. So, what were some of the challenges that you faced trying to get all these people coordinated into an emergency management strategy? Because, like you said, they all each have their own because their own hazards. What were some of the challenges you faced?
You know, a lot of it is just getting an understanding of what the needs are. And if you're a teacher in any capacity, in general, you're pretty used to having a range of levels of understanding in your class anyway, right? And so
Mhm.
you've written some of the material for people who are already pretty advanced and want to get better. You've written the material for people who are kind of in the middle and have an idea of what you're talking about, but could really advance the understanding. And then you want to write some of the material for people who have no idea what you're talking about, but they need to figure it out. So often in any industry, really, you end up having people needing to learn from you as an emergency manager who have no idea what you do, but they have been tasked on top of their regular full-time day job to somehow now understand what you do and apply that to their
Mm,
company or their agency or whatever that is. So, um, it's the same with the districts then, right? They're all
mhm,
in kind of different places in their preparedness level, their ability to make time and to have opportunities for practice and stuff like that. Um, Some of them have a lot of turnover. COVID caused a lot of turnover in a lot of um, sectors, and certainly, the utility sector is no different.
Really? Wow.
So yeah. Also, I mean, we're not getting any younger, right? So there are
Oh, that's
generations
true.
that kind of
Yeah.
they kind of all retire around the same
Right.
time, and then we're really looking to build our new staff and kind of bring the new people along. And that's another thing. As a group, we're talking about things like internship programs and um, the opportunity to kind of get that hands-on practice at different districts, so that when you go and you do your water classes, you also are working in the field and you're getting your hours in. And then when the PWAG agencies want to hire you, they know what you know. So apprenticeships, internships, all of that stuff is becoming more, I think, at the forefront of our conversations as an association together. Um, but yeah, I need to figure out what they need. And then we try to understand whether it's most helpful to give them what they need in a group setting, or whether I need to go to each individual agency and provide that. That right now, because I'm still a little bit of a noob in the group, right? Only almost 2 years. It's not that long. So there are 19 of them and one of me. And
Mm,
sometimes I confuse who does what in my head and stuff like that. So I'm
mm,
just trying to make sure that sometimes when you give training or you do an exercise, it's better to do it with several agencies together. They can hear each other's questions, they can see the different things that different districts are doing, and that's really beneficial. Sometimes they want to be able to ask questions or solve problems in private, right? And they want to work through it in a way where they're not necessarily advertising what they don't know or what they're not sure how to do yet. And so I think that's my biggest challenge, is just making sure they get what they need. Another challenge for a bunch of my districts, and it isn't necessarily a challenge for me professionally, but I think it's something we have to keep working on, is some of them are so small that they literally don't have enough humans to have active field disaster response and people left sitting in the office providing support.
mm,
So if we're not going to be able to stand up an ICS structure in the field with that incident command system, um, and then also have an EOC in the office, how do we figure out how to support them as the other districts? And that was actually a question they grappled with before I got there. And they decided what they were going to do is have the person in my position be the coordinator. And so I kind of act as the multi-agency coordination body for them. We're in the process of writing a coordination plan for the association. So rather than having an emergency response plan for all 19 districts, it's a coordination plan, and each individual one is going to activate their emergency response plan. So I don't stand up an EOC. But one of the smart things they decided to do was make relationships with consultants who could come in and support them in that support function. So if we've got ICS up and running in the field, everybody's in the field fixing the things and dealing with the issues that happened during the disaster, with the equipment and the pipes and everything,
hmm.
then we can bring in, one of these consultants that everybody has already met. We've created relationships with them. They kind of remind us who they are and do short presentations to us a couple of times a year. They can come in and say, all right, let's pull a couple of retired people back into the office, or let's pull a couple people from other districts into the office. Here's how we structure emergency response support functions in the office. And here's how we're going to do it. Let's not forget to do all of this documentation. So I think that was a really smart way to kind of deal with that challenge, because if you don't have enough people for an EOC, you don't have enough people for an EOC, and yet the field is going to need support. So even if they have that consultant and one or two people in the office, they can maintain contact with me. I can maintain contact with everybody else. We can get that mutual aid, the mutual assistance happening, and help provide whatever support the field is going to need, even if they don't necessarily have enough people within the agency themselves.
Yeah, I guess that was, you kind of answered my question, but as far as an EOC goes, do you have like, you guys don't like do a tabletop exercise together as an EOC? Maybe you do separate ones for separate utilities, or how does that work?
That's right. Yeah, we do. So, because not all of my districts expect to stand up an EOC unless something's really catastrophic, we tend to do any types of EOC training and exercises individually. I mean, the
Mm,
fact of the matter is, and I tell my districts this all the time, it's so fun to work with them because they know how to respond to an emergency. They don't need me to tell them how to respond
mm,
to an emergency. Things break all the time. I joke with them like, that's Tuesday.
yeah.
So they get very, very far into an emergency response scenario before they would need to activate a disaster
Mm,
response mechanism within the district. They get very far. And if
mm,
that's the case, it behooves them to start to, rather than, so often emergency managers, we say, oh, the disaster happened, the EOC spins up, the field is doing the work. And that's kind of a forward-leaning stance on behalf of the EOC. And what I advocate for with my districts is for them to draw response support from the office when they need it.
mhm,
It's super common for some bad things to have happened in the field, but plenty of the water system is still working correctly.
mhm,
So that means that the office staff, the support staff are often still needing to do their full-time job.
mhm,
And there are often even field staff at the water district that are doing their day-to-day. And then we've divided people up to respond to the emergency or disaster part of the thing. So if we can kind of shift the habit of the field staff to notice, okay, here the switch is going to flip. I'm so busy. The chaos has gotten so large. Now I'm going to start asking for response support from the office, and I'm going to call them and I'm going to say, I need this, this, and this. So we talk about when we train them on their emergency response plans, who could you cross train? Who's in the office? Who could provide that support for you? I mean, 9 times out of 10, it's logistics, right? I need a
mhm,
part. I need a thing.
mhm,
Our piece of equipment broke. Can we borrow somebody else's backhoe? Or, half of our operators are out with COVID, like, can we borrow people? So the habit needs to be in the field now. They're so used to being able to respond to an emergency, and they generally do it without help from the office. So we need to create that muscle memory of, okay, now I'm in the position where I need help. I'm going to call them, I'm going to let them know what they need. So I encourage most of them to start their EOC activation on a virtual scale, right? People
mhm,
are still sitting at their desks, they've got access to their computer and their files
mhm,
and everything they need. Hopefully, they've been cross-trained ahead of time because we've thought about this already. And when the field calls and says, all right, I need help, they know how to get started. That way,
mhm,
I've only got a couple of districts that would spin up an EOC, and when they do, they're probably transitioning a virtual EOC into an in-person EOC, and things have just gotten so big that
mhm,
it's really time to move everybody into a separate room and kind of do all of the scheduled meetings and all of that stuff. So that's a unique part of the water industry. They know how to do this stuff already. So for EOCs, on the one hand, it's a little bit more ingrained, right? They can just ask for help right away, and it doesn't have to be the full staffed up EOC. And at the same time, um, it's a little bit, it takes a little bit longer for them to get to that place anyway where they need it.
mhm. That's good. Wow. So that coordinator title you have is pretty, it means something because
Yes.
you're coordinating so much stuff. I mean, I think you're coordinating
Yeah.
a lot of moving parts. So it's pretty, it sounds like a tough job. I
It's
was
so fun. Every day is different.
Oh well, it sounds like you handle it just well. Yeah, talk about CalWarn. I know you're a big advocate. I'm a big advocate of CalWarn, and I know you're on
Mhm.
the board, right? You're on the board of CalWarn.
That's right. So I'm one of the two Region 1 reps for CalWarn. And it's so important to have this statewide mutual assistance body that can help coordinate. And it's just a bigger version, right, of what I do, what We Rock does. In the Inland Empire, they've got Ernie doing their mutual assistance. And so it allows us to plug directly in to the state mechanism. It also just helps us kind of catch up with what's going on in different regions of the state. So 9 times out of 10 for that board meeting, I'm learning about the different districts in the different regions and kind of the seasonal issues they have, or some of the compliance issues they're having. And so it's a great way to just stay connected on the
Mm.
statewide level. Um, and the thing is too, to be able to belong to a statewide association like that and not have the membership cost and really have it just be there when you need it, I think is really beneficial to the member agencies.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And as far as coordinating all the cyber issues, I mean, how did that go? Because you have so many water utilities. Was there like an exercise you did with everybody, or did you kind of tailor fit to whatever size the utility was, which I imagine you did.
What we have been doing since I have been at PWAG is trying to kind of have the rising tide lift all the boats and get the districts to a more unified
Mm,
place in their ability to kind of know what cybersecurity is, and to kind of protect their networks. And the thing about it is that there are plenty of people who are almost never in the office.
mm,
They either work in the field, or they work in a treatment plant, or they work in a lab, whatever that looks like. They come in and do their timesheet once a week, maybe check their email. That's kind of it. And so that's a really interesting component of cybersecurity for utilities, because
mm.
it's not just water. Right? I'm sure this happens at power utilities and stuff
No,
like that
absolutely.
too.
Yeah.
Right. So the people who sit in the office all day, they get the reminders, they see the emails, they work with emails, they work with documents, they may sit in front of their computer all day, but a lot of us are, in the field doing physical things, and it's rare. So there's that piece of it. And it's different at every district for me. Of course, they're also unique. And then they're all automated. So I don't have anybody that's not automated, and that what is what makes us so vulnerable on the
Yeah.
cybersecurity, side of things. Before everybody had automation, it was real hard to poison the water, like physically. By the
Mhm.
time you got your big truck full of whatever chemical it was all the way out to my reservoir and wanted to dump it in, boy, we noticed you were there 9 times out of 10. So
Right.
we weren't so worried about threats like that. But because the water systems are connected via our internet network to programs that allow us to see those controls on a tablet or on a laptop, sometimes even on our phones. And that allows us to monitor them remotely 24/7. That's great. It's so efficient. Um, but it also makes us vulnerable because now our physical equipment in the field is connected to our network. So that's the big
Mm,
scary part. And so what we have to try and figure out then is, I get a lot of alerts and warnings from different cybersecurity agencies, and I'm always trying to figure out, well, what's going to be relevant to my districts, and like what is extra and it's just going to be confusing and filling up their inbox. That's still a real challenge for me to try to figure out. But I mention that because since we're all automated, all the different districts automated their systems at different times. They use different vendors and software to do that. They have different actual physical equipment that needed to be connected to the automation program. So all the ages of the physical equipment and the network equipment, and it's all different with every
mm.
district I have. So just
Wow.
trying to help them. Yeah. And then of course the automation software changes and improves all the time. Um, the physical water equipment, the technology for cleaning and purifying and moving water changes all the time. hackers get more, they get more efficient, right? They get better at what they're doing. They get more dangerous. So things are, all the pieces are always moving.
Hmm.
And I just figured out that I needed to add this to my repertoire of skill sets. So what I've been focusing on doing is trying to make sure that the different levels of users get the kind of training that they need. I want to make sure that the districts feel like they have enough information to understand whether or not their IT vendor is doing a good job. A lot of my districts have an outside IT vendor versus an internal position. If they needed to go shop for a new vendor, if they felt like they wanted to make a move, how do they do that? You know, what are they looking for? When I'm sending the alerts, I would hope that they are a duplication actually of an alert they're already getting from their vendor, for example.
Hmm.
So I'm just trying to give them all the tools that they need to make all of these decisions to keep their district safe. And then we're going to start doing trainings together and exercises together as a group after we've kind of spent some time really doing these foundational activities so that each individual agency, you know, can just see the lay of the land, understand what they need, and then try to make sure that they are implementing protections at the right level for them.
Okay, great, great. And are any of your water utilities like actively seeking grant funding from federal agencies at all? Is that play a factor at all, or?
You know, I have a couple of districts that I know have done the security evaluations, and I
Hmm.
think it's the FBI that comes in and does those in partnership with CISA. And they did that before I got here, which is really great. And it's something um, that I send out as a reminder every year that they can do that. I took the training for from the FBI for they call it infrastructure liaison officer. So if you're in police or fire, you're the terrorism liaison officer. If you're a utility,
Hmm.
so I'm designated ILO for the association, and I get those alerts as well. Um, and so we're always just trying to make sure that they have uh they've got a way to orient new people, because it's the humans that are the big problem,
Hmm.
unfortunately. We make mistakes and we forget, or
Hmm.
we, you know, whatever
Yep.
whatever that looks like, but we tend to let in the bad guys. And so yeah, belonging to Water ISAC, being the ILO, and kind of giving them that umbrella viewpoint of all of the difficulties that are out there, I think helps the individual agencies apply that in whatever way that they're going to be able to apply it.
Okay. And are your water agencies, are they close by in location, or would you say they're sometimes kind of far away from each other? I'm just trying to grasp like.
Yeah, I mean, I have some that are close to each other. I've got a couple that are I've got a couple in Antelope Valley.
Oh wow.
So at least there are two, so they're
Hmm.
not completely by themselves out there.
Hmm.
And then I've got one that's way out in Claremont, Pomona area.
Oh
And
wow.
they're
So they're
pretty
not
far.
close together
Yeah,
at all.
they're not close. I've got one that's all the way down in Bellflower.
Uh-huh.
And so they're kind of far from everybody.
Hmm.
So they've the members have limited the association membership so far to LA County. We'll see if that continues in coming years, but those are some of the things that we think about when we talk about mutual assistance and helping each other as a group. You know, what are the things that our districts that are far from each other are going to need, or some of our teeny tiny districts. So when they purchased the 3 shared portable generators, for example, they planned to host one of them in the Antelope Valley, right? Because
Mm.
trying to get it all the way out there, especially after an earthquake, is
Yeah,
going to be nearly impossible, right? Those roads are
absolutely.
going to be impassable. Hmm. And then one of our other teeny tiny districts was hosting one of them because the chances that they're the ones that are going to need it are very high.
Mm.
So Yeah, we're always thinking about that. But we have a bunch of them that are kind of in the San Gabriel Valley area.
Okay.
That's probably the central kind of uh and we all get together usually in the San Gabriel Valley somewhere when we do meetings. But
Okay.
I know that the Zoom meetings were great for the Antelope Valley folks because that's a drive.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely, especially in traffic. I've done it before.
Oh, you know what? I've been out there a couple of times this summer to give training, and it was so green both times because we've had all this crazy rain.
Yeah,
And so to drive all the way, to Palmdale and have green mountains and stuff all the way, I
that
had
is weird.
never had
Yeah,
that before. Yeah.
yeah,
So,
that's weird.
but it's important for me to physically go out there and be out there with them and see what they're working with and kind of what the distances look like. The weather's very different for them. The landscape is very different for them. So
Hmm.
they share some challenges with everybody, and then they've got some that are unique to them. So, going around to all of my districts and being there physically, it's just really helping me again to know what they might need and think about what would be helpful for them and ways to connect them. Make sure they're connected to local cities, help them stay connected to the county, whether that's making sure that the Office of Emergency Management knows that we're here and we're ready to help coordinate if they need that, connecting them to their disaster management area coordinators. I've got districts that are in DMA B, C, D, and E.
Hmm.
And I've known most of those DMACs for a really long time. So that's really a great support system. And knowing that we've got those professionals on the county level to help us stay aware and have that situational big picture and be connected through them, it's very helpful.
That's good. I always wonder
Mhm.
too, like why don't water utilities do more what you guys are doing with PWAG? I mean, there's PWAG, there's REROC, right? That's kind of similar. But how come
Mhm.
more cities don't do this, especially the mid to small, and get together and try to help each other out? Because it provides such a good network of information and resources, so you guys can help each other out, especially if someone is close by you. I would think, if I
Yeah.
was a water utility, I would want to do that. I'd want to have like this partnership, So I find it weird that like only there's you, there's We Rock. I mean, am I missing someone else? I don't.
Ernie's in the Inland Empire. I forget what Ernie stands for. Um, but those are the three that I know about
Yeah,
in Southern California.
there's three, and we
San
have 300 fault
Diego,
lines.
yes,
We
yes,
have
right. I
300 fault
mean,
lines
yeah,
in
we have
in, in Los Angeles.
a lot of fault lines, a lot of potential earthquakes. San Diego Water Authority also has, and I'm not super familiar, but I know that they have some sort of organizational structure down there. I ended up having to do my terrorism training in San Diego just because COVID made it difficult and
Mm,
they weren't giving it LA or Orange County anytime soon. So I drove down to San Diego, and I'm familiar with their InfraGard water sector folks and stuff like that. So I know San Diego's kind of working on it a little bit. I don't really know why. I tell my friends and my family when they ask me, so how's the job? You still like it? The thing about working at PWAG that is different than any other emergency management job I've ever had is that I don't have to convince anybody of the
mm,
importance of the
yeah.
uh, and that was a big component of my job as an
Hmm.
emergency manager when I was a consultant.
Hmm.
Here's why it's important for your company to have an emergency response plan. Here's why it's important for you to encourage your employees to be prepared at home. Here's why we need to try and make the time for an exercise. This, that, and the other thing. It's so important. It's so important. The PWAG agencies get it. And I mean, I mentioned it before, they just are so excited to learn more and they want to improve and they want to find ways to better withstand and recover from a disaster. 10 of our districts are in the middle of doing a multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan right now,
Oh wow.
for that reason, because you mentioned grants before. So this idea of let's have a plan so we're eligible for federal funding for some of these mitigation
Hmm.
projects. Um, it's delightful to me that I'm sharing what I know, and they're excited to receive that information and implement it. And I don't have that. rolling the rock up the hill thing of like, well, first of all, let me tell you why it's a good
Mhm.
idea. They get it.
Yeah. Not everybody is emergency preparedness minded. I like to say, like they just
Mm-mm.
don't think about those things and are not worried about it, especially if it's never happened to them. But the guy that's happened to,
Mhm.
those are your best customers. The ones that they've had an emergency, those are the ones that are the best. Like they understand how quickly things can go. So yeah, I totally understand what
Yes.
you're saying.
I think you're right. And that might also answer your previous question too. That might be why other districts don't form associations.
Yeah.
Maybe they just haven't had something that they felt was overwhelming and needed help. Or maybe, especially for city departments
Hmm.
that are water districts, right? It's possible that the way that their city preparedness program is structured, when they had something happen, they got the help that they needed. And
Yeah.
hallelujah, right?
Hmm.
Good for them. So,
Right.
but yeah, I definitely think it's interesting for me always being an emergency manager. I'm not from California. I'm from the Midwest. And so we'd like to talk and joke about, being ready for different types of disasters and what you're worried about and what you're not worried about. Um, I think preparedness can sometimes be a thing where, you imagine that huge, great shakeout earthquake, and that seems like, oh, well, there's nothing we can do at that point. Everything's broken and everybody's dead. And, why get prepared for something like that? Um, but it's so often not that thing, right?
Mm.
Northridge was
Yeah.
huge,
Yeah.
but it wasn't the great shakeout. And
Mhm.
everything wasn't broken and everybody wasn't dead. And a lot of people needed help. So, kind of getting past that, it's a very natural human reaction to feel threatened and to kind of go straight to overwhelm.
Mhm.
Um, but I also think the more that we get prepared and the more that we talk about it, the more that we practice things, um, the more people have an idea. Well, okay, I'm not going to be able to control everything. The earthquake is coming or it's not, but there are things I know how to do, and there are things I can try to control. And that's a good feeling because humans want agency. We
Mhm.
want to be able to make a difference, right?
Right.
Um, I think in a critical infrastructure sector like water, it's a big deal. We're all very proud of providing plentiful, safe, clean water for people to drink and for, hospitals to use for sanitary reasons and to supply the fire department with for firefighting. I mean, we're very proud of that. And so if there are things that I can be telling agencies, let's get to a place where we're doing this to the best of our abilities before things go sideways, and it can help us to continue that mission that we have. That's a better feeling. But I have a lot of sympathy for people who don't want to talk about it. It's
Mhm.
scary,
Mhm.
especially if you have elderly relatives that you care for, if you have
Mhm.
small children. Or somebody in your family maybe has access and functional needs and can't care for themselves at all,
Mhm.
that feels very frightening that they would be put at risk in any way.
Absolutely.
So I have a little sympathy for it and just trying to help them get through that and to the other side where now we can talk about the preparedness stuff can really be helpful, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I totally agree. And what's the I don't know what's the goal of PWAG? Do you guys want to get bigger or like do if I'm a mid-sized water utility and I want to join, can I join? Like how does that work?
Typically, they make invitations. I think
Okay.
right now they're as big as they'd like to be. They may add one or two. But what they wanted to do is get agencies together who were kind of in the same boat, in terms of how their districts were run, how they wanted to be proactive with preparedness, response, and recovery. That's a big deal
Hmm.
because once you join, there are expectations. It's not just the fees for the association. You
Hmm.
really need to participate to be a member. And if you're not willing to do that, it might not be the right place for your agency. So,
Okay.
um, if there are districts that wanted to take a look at it, our website is pwaggroup.org. Actually, we're about to update it, so I'm pretty excited about that.
Hmm.
But yeah, they could always shoot us an email through the website and see if they are eligible for membership and what that might look like, because it's very active. You really got to be willing to do the work and go to the meetings and participate in projects and train your staff and be active.
Right, right. It's not like just buying insurance and you sit on
No.
and I call you when I need you.
Yes.
It's not like that.
It's not just no, it's not just anybody over here. WAG.
Okay, that's good to know. Well, I think that's our time. I wanted to end early just so I don't want to take up too much of your time. But if there's anything else you want to add that you'd like to tell everybody, like maybe some advice for mid small size water utilities that you would recommend.
Well, let's see. I would say encourage staff to become prepared at home. A lot of water district staff are disaster service workers, so there is that expectation that they'll come in after a disaster.
Hmm.
But if their family's not safe, they're not going to be able to come, right? So
Hmm.
the more prepared they are at home, the better they're going to feel about coming into work and making the water go.
Makes sense.
And yeah. Um, there are a lot of really good tools out there, even if you don't belong to an association that's actively doing preparedness work. So I would say go to ready.gov and take a look at some of the resources on there. I would say make it a priority to participate in the Great Shakeout in some way as a district every single year
Hmm.
because we live in earthquake country. Um, and boy, an earthquake, it's a whole bunch of different kinds of chaos for a water
Hmm.
district since we've got the pipes in the ground and the
Hmm.
buildings above. And then the last thing I would like to say is pay attention to how the natural threats around your service area may be changing over time because weather is different.
Hmm.
So I mentioned earlier, we've got year-round wildfire season, and that didn't used to be the case even 10
Yeah.
years ago. So if you've been at your district for 30 years, I promise you that the threats that your district is vulnerable to are a little bit different now than they were when you joined 20, 25 years ago. So kind of pay attention to that. Um, I have a district who had a tornado touchdown in their service area earlier this year, and we're trying to figure out, well, do we add tornado to our insurance policy? Like, is this going to,
Hmm.
California, is this going to be a regular thing? So yeah, pay good attention to that. And then just I think on a health and safety level, because we're seeing so many more thunderstorms in Southern California in the last 6 or 7 years than we've seen in a long time, from me to you as a Midwesterner by birth, there
Hmm.
is no safe place outside when you hear thunder or see lightning.
Hmm.
So please, please train your staff. It's so common for me to go to a water district and all 35 people who work there are from California. Let's
Hmm.
build the appropriate level of concern for lightning
Hmm.
because I'm so sad every time somebody walking their dog in a rainstorm in
Oh,
California is
yeah.
struck by lightning. It's so senseless and it's really not necessary. So that's kind of the new hazard that I'm really hitting hard when I go and give training. I am going to do my absolute best to make sure nobody is injured by lightning on my watch. And I was raised with it, so I will help you raise your concern level for that. But yeah, ready.gov, great shakeout, get started somewhere. And join CalWarn. And you can always, even just call your CalWarn rep and say, hey, what preparedness recommendations do you have for our district?
Yeah, very good. Yeah, us Californians, we're very ignorant to a lot of things.
I'm
We're
a,
just not used to thunder and lightning.
right. And I mean, I'm a little cranky about it because I thought I was giving up the tornadoes and
Mhm.
saying, okay, I will accept
Oh
the
no,
fact of earth,
they followed you.
right? And now here they come. What?
They followed you, Alex.
They
Oh,
did.
well, that's really good advice. I'm sure anybody listening would is definitely going to benefit from this. So we thank you. I thank you very much for coming on, and I know you're making a lot of waves in the emergency management in arena with CalWarn, and then with what you do with PWAG. So we love having you here in this industry.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me today.
All right. Well, thanks, Alex. All right.